Absolutely.
The higher earners in our economy are, apart from professional services, financial service and the health sector, the highest earners here are in the multinational sector.
Yeah.
And we have an incredibly progressive income tax system in the sense that the more you earn, the more tax you pay. So that means that huge percentage of your income tax is dependent on those workers in the multinational sector. Last year, of our merchandise exports, and this is what Trump is focusing on, the chemical and pharmaceutical sector, which is dominated by multinationals, US multinationals particularly, they accounted for 66% of our total exports.
Welcome back to Platinum Property Podcast. In today's episode, Paul chatted with one of Ireland's leading and best-known economical analysts, Mr. Jim Power. Jim is well known and runs his own excellent podcast with his friend Chris Johns, and it's called The Other Hand Podcast, and it's well worth a listen in. So in today's episode, Jim discussed his personal journey which led him to economics. He discusses what influenced the economy of a country and the current state of affairs both internally and externally within this country. Jim talks a lot about Mr. Donald Trump and all the uncertainty and confusion he is causing worldwide. So sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy this podcast.
Okay, welcome back to this episode of Platinum Podcast. Today, we're joined by a very, very good friend of us, ours here in Platinum, and a lot of our extended members take Jim's advice on, and we try and look into his world of business and the economy, obviously, which a lot of entrepreneurs struggle to try and read. So we asked Jim to pop back in today. Sit back, relax. Maybe listen to this episode a couple of times over because there's a couple of things going to sink in as we go through it. But today we're honoured to have Jim Power in the HQ. Jim, you're very, very welcome.
Delighted to be here, Paul. So thank you very much for the invitation.
No problem at all.
I hope your clients get some sort of coherent message out of this, because my mind isn't particularly coherent at the moment, so we'll see.
Well, look, we have a great lineup for today. So a couple of again, I'm not the highly educated as yourself, so these questions are going to keep down to very simple and format, but I think we have got a high level of confusion happening around the world, and we're going to try and make it a little bit easier after today's chat. So, Jim, just for those of you who don't know, you done a talk here upstairs with all our members around 2022, late 2022, I think November time. I think maybe the war in Ukraine had just started. But for those people that don't know you, that may be listening in now to our business podcast, a little bit about yourself and how you got into the world of
Paul, I was afraid for one moment there you were going to remind me of what I said back in 2022. I don't like going back on my predictions for obvious reasons. I started life, I'm from Waterford, left school. I actually was due to start science in UCD. And unfortunately, I was offered a job by AIB. So I took it because, at 17, prospect of money, etc., seemed very attractive. I worked in an AIB branch for a while here in Dublin, hated every minute of it. Went back to UCD. I did a degree in economics and politics, primary degree, and then I went on for another 2 years and did a master's in economics. AIB then offered me a job in their dealing room, at basically providing economic advice to traders on the trading floor and in the IFSC. And I was there for about a year. And then Bank of Ireland offered me a job in a similar role. And in fact, the guy who hired me in Bank of Ireland was Chris Johns, whom I now do a podcast, The Other Hand, give it a plug.
Oh, yeah.
With, okay. Yeah. And I worked in Bank of Ireland for 8 years. And Chris left after a couple of years. So I was chief economist at Bank of Ireland for a while. And then I guess that corporate world didn't suit me at all, to be honest. I got a job working with Friends First Asset Management in the pension fund management area for a few years. It was always a 3-day-a-week job, so it was never really a full-time role. But very good company and treated me really well over the years. And after, I'd say, whatever is 2009, 2010, really in the height of the recession here, I decided I was going to go totally freelance. I started my own business, and since then I'm on the speaking circuit. I do media. I have the podcast since 2021. I do a lot of reports for different bodies, provide advice and so on. So it's very much a portfolio approach. So I guess all told, I've been in the economics world for about 35 years at this stage.
Oh my God.
And I love it.
Yeah. Well, look, as again, people like younger people like myself, and maybe people are listening in here, and that are involved in the world of property, we have to look into the future as well. We also have to take advice from yourselves, and we have to be able to, you take on a massive amount of stuff coming in. You're worldwide. You're watching stuff that's a good bit down the road, which we'll be talking about later on. But you deliver back simple content that's digestible, and maybe for a young investor that's getting involved in the property circuit, or even going to invest in stocks and shares, they can feel a little bit comfortable making that decision.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to recognize, I'm an economist, and I spend my life analyzing economies, and but increasingly politics is becoming more and more influential in the world of economics. Perhaps it was always so, but I just think since the Brexit referendum in the UK in 2016, the election of Trump later that year, and everything that has happened since then, the Ukraine war, the recent re-election of Trump, all of this stuff, these political developments have a huge impact on the world of economics. And one thing I would always say about anybody listening to an economist or taking economic advice, it is one part of the equation. Yeah. Okay. And there is nothing certain in the world of economics. It's not a physical science like chemistry where you put two compounds into a test tube, you get a certain result. In the world of economics, it's driven by human behavior. Yeah. And so, that's the caveat. The economic backdrop is incredibly important, and in the longer term, I think economics generally asserts itself. But over time, you see political influences, Putin's invasion of Ukraine had a huge impact. The Brexit referendum had a huge impact. The recent election of Trump, which I'm sure will dominate the podcast, has had a huge and will have a huge impact. Yeah. So, but I still believe, passionately that the economic backdrop and understanding what's happening is really, really important.
Yeah, and it's a human decision making that's happening behind it. We'll I know we'll probably go into this later on. Will AI have an effect on stuff like that with algorithms trying to throw out a lot of crap and
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And AI is not something that has suddenly hit us. It's been building up over years, but it is definitely the next great technological leap. Going back to do you remember when the internet was introduced?
Yeah.
Prior to the internet, and the younger viewers mightn't believe there was a time pre-internet, but there was.
Yeah.
So back in those days when I worked in AIB and Bank of Ireland, I traveled to the States 2 or 3 times a year, traveled to Frankfurt to meet the European Central Bank, the Bundesbank initially, and then the European Central Bank. I used to go to the City of London at least once a month, basically to sit down with economists and business people to talk about what's going on. And then when the internet arrived, suddenly all of this stuff was possible online. Yeah. So that was a major technological leap. And I think the developments we've seen in AI likewise. But I think it is becoming more dangerous in the sense that it's very difficult at this stage to really believe or not believe what you're reading.
Yeah.
Because stuff is generated by AI, and what you get out is as good as what's put in a sense. So I think the interpretation of news is becoming more and more difficult. I guess from my perspective, I analyze statistics. When I see, I'm on top of the world of statistics on a permanent basis, be it Ireland, States, Europe, wherever. So that's a very important part of what I do. But also, I have trusted publications. I like The Economist. I like the Financial Times. I like the Wall Street Journal. I like the Harvard Business Review. There's a quarterly called Foreign Affairs, a US publication. I read stuff like that, because I trust it. I may not agree with it, but I trust it. Whereas a lot of stuff I'm seeing online now, I just don't know whether to believe it or not, to be honest. So I think in some ways, while AI is a major, major development, I think one needs to be very careful about how you use it. I teach economics on the MBA program in UCD. I've done it for a few years now, and when I'm getting assignments from my students now, I have to try and figure out, is this what they wrote or is it AI generated?
So you're confused even with it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult
to read.
To read.
Yeah.
So I guess I think what anybody out there, your clients, anybody listening to this, ourselves, what we really need to try and understand is what is factual and what is not.
It reminds me of, you go to the doctor, you've got a twinge in your eye. Next thing you take up Google, and all of a sudden you're the doctor, and you go back to the doctor, and the doctor says, is there any need for me today? Well, not really. If you give me this and this. So again, you're reading stuff that, the twinge in your eye can be caused by too much coffee or too much tea, but all of a sudden there's 10 different answers and you're trying to do it. But I think what we do is we let the economists do their thing because we're not reading all that information, and we'll naturally in life, but I think we'll always pick a few people we trust, and we'll try and keep them around us, and that's why we have you back here. So let me bring you back a little bit. And I know you don't like going back, you like going forward, but let's bring back to 2022 upstairs. We had a packed event. We had some really, really clever people come in. I sort of snuck you in the back door, got you onto the stage, and bang. Everything, because back then, which we're not going back too long, we were in really uncertain times. Now we're just, I feel that we've only not come out of it, but we're sort of, that has settled, and then next thing we've got this Trump thing looming all around the place. But in 2022, you were upstairs, you gave a great advice, you gave great talk, you gave us a good bit of look into the future with interest rates going up. The Ukraine and Russia war had probably started, and it was causing massive levels of confusion. It was causing the massive levels of uncertainty. The guys that I had in my group were there for property. They didn't know if they invest in property, is it going to collapse? Is it going to start? Or, they wanted to start their careers in property. And you sort of leveled out the playing field and said, guys, look, this is the facts. The facts is we have a housing crisis. We have all these things different happening, and the war has kicked off. What's your thoughts on the Ukraine and Russia war now? Do you think we're going to eventually come to an end with this thing, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I guess even going back a little bit further to, I mentioned the Brexit referendum in 2016.
Yeah.
The economic consequences of that have been phenomenal. There's no doubt about it. And we still we're living through the consequence. I guess from an Irish perspective, actually, Brexit has been pretty beneficial in some ways.
Yeah.
Then we got March 2020 COVID, which had a huge impact, and
massive impact,
and it has a huge impact on property as well. I was in San Francisco last week, and you can see the impact of COVID there with empty office space in the city centre. Remote working, all of that stuff. So, and we see the same here in Dublin, and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We initially saw a surge in energy prices, food prices. It fed into the COVID-driven inflation spike, and there was a sense last year. The Ukraine war. It is a horrific war. But it had sort of settled down in a sense. In the sense that it wasn't having the same impact on financial markets and energy prices and commodity prices. And that's what the markets do. You may think it's unfortunate or whatever, but the markets just adjust to whatever environment is in place, okay? And that certainly happened with the Ukraine war. I think Trump is probably going to get a settlement there, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's one that's going to be totally...
it's on his agenda.
It's on his agenda. It's totally disadvantageous to Ukraine. There's no doubt Putin and Russia will be the winners here. And that's horrific.
Yeah.
But, I think it's starting to stabilize. I'm not being complacent or cruel,
but I think
whatever about this, but it is starting to stabilize.
They want it at this stage.
Trump does not want that war going on, and particularly because of the financial drain it has had on the United States. And also, I think what Trump is certainly would be happier about now is the fact that we're starting to see European countries, particularly Germany, starting to up their defense spending because Trump believed that Europe was not playing its proper role in terms of funding NATO and defense spending. So, so I think that that war in Ukraine, I think a resolution will come. As I say, it will not be advantageous for Ukraine, but at least, peace hopefully will be restored as quickly as possible.
And it's probably a true fact when world leaders come head to head and they can't get a solution, they seem to just go to war and say, okay, well, this is, and I know, over the last while, and you can get dragged into this mist as well, and you can get so paranoid about it, and you can start listening to all the conspiracies, and then you can also get dragged into the world of AI, and you're like, oh, I don't believe anything I'm listening to now. But again, we have to be very careful when we hear this word World War III, and all the leaders are starting to talk about it. And then obviously we're going to go into Trump now, because I think he's going to be the main talk of this podcast. But I when you hear him say things like that, and I think embarrassed himself a little bit last week, whether he's trying to get this deal done or not. But I mean, the way he reacted, in my eyes, and I think for a lot of people, that it's not the way to.
No, that afternoon of the infamous J.D. Vance, Trump, Zelensky meeting, I would say I was in San Francisco, and I was out for dinner that evening with a few locals in San Francisco, and they were utterly horrified. They were embarrassed. They sort of said, "This is not the way America treats foreign leaders." Yeah, but the rule book has been torn up by Trump. There's no doubt about that. But going back to that whole global geopolitical situation, I mean, the world is a very dangerous place now. You have the emergence of China, and Xi Jinping is definitely becoming more authoritarian, and is becoming more paranoid about the outside world. And Taiwan is the flashpoint there. It will be watching it. He's watching it like a hawk. Yeah. We have what Putin is doing in Russia, and other countries like Estonia, Poland, Finland are very worried now about what Putin might do next. Yeah, particularly if he comes out on the upside with the Ukraine war. We have, North Korea is an ongoing festering sore. Iran, and in Africa, there's a lot of wars going on in sub-Saharan Africa at the moment. Sudan is horrific, but as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you look at any place in Africa at the moment.
I think someone was saying there's like 43 different wars or something going on at least. That we only hear maybe.
And I think it's the most people, the highest number of people are fighting on earth at the moment at any time since the Second World War. Yeah. So it's, and I kind of feel that in the midst of all of this total geopolitical chaos, the stability always was the relationship between the States and Europe. There was a united front there. And I think that was a very important counterweight to all of the other stuff that's going on. And unfortunately, that is now breaking down. Yeah. I mean, Trump hates the European Union, basically. And he believes the European Union was set up to screw the United States, which is totally wrong, but that's his belief system. Yeah. So it really disturbs me to see the fracturing of the relationship between the United States and Europe. The one positive would be that because of Trump's approach, Europe is definitely becoming more united. We're seeing Keir Starmer in the UK trying to rebuild relationships with Ireland, which I think is really important, but also with the rest of Europe. We see the French, the Germans, the Italians now starting to
pull together.
Yeah. So maybe inadvertently, Trump will succeed in uniting what was a very disunited Europe even at the end of last year.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the clip the other day, but Ozzy, let's pull up this clip the other day of, I think it could have been yesterday maybe, of Trump. And just let's take your opinion on this. Just pull up that clip.
On the EU, will you respond to their retaliation?
Oh, of course I'm going to respond.
You will retaliate.
The problem is our country didn't respond. Look, the EU was set up in order to take advantage of the United States.
Including Ireland? Is Ireland taking advantage of the US?
Of course they are. I can't, I have great respect for Ireland and what they did. And they should have done just what they did. but the United States shouldn't have let it happen. We had stupid leaders. We had leaders that didn't have a clue. Or let's say they weren't business people, but they didn't have a clue what was happening. I'm not happy with the European Union, I want to tell you. And,
Will you put tariffs
and
on
we're going to
cars?
win that. We're going to win that financial battle. It's a
Tariffs
financial
on
battle.
European cars, Mr. President?
Vance sitting there as if nothing's happening.
Something you're next.
Oh, absolutely.
JD Vance's lovely socks, though.
Think of it. They have millions of cars coming in, millions and millions of cars. One of probably the largest. Japan's very big too. But
Clip it there, Ozzy. So you can clearly see this guy has an agenda, and I think Trump getting back in here, whether we had a problem with Sleepy Biden, as he keeps calling him, and saying he was fast asleep, whether a lot of things were happening while he may have been asleep, this man seems to be moving at a serious pace, whether you like him or don't like him, because I know this is going to cause a lot of confusion. But what I'm seeing now is, and again, I'm only trying to simplify this down a little bit. This guy has an agenda. He reckons there's 5 million of us here. I think we're probably getting close to 7. So I know we're a small little nation, but we've taken probably around, I don't know, you can correct me on this, 35 to 40 billion from economies.
Corporation tax,
taxes.
yeah.
So in your opinion, Jim,
Yeah.
the $1 million question is, if this, I'm going to say crazed lunatic, makes a decision to do something on tariffs or something here, are we in trouble?
Yeah.
We are delighted to announce that this podcast is sponsored by Platinum Property Training.
Start your property education today. From simply one click of a button, you could be part of the Platinum team. We have made this so affordable for everybody in the country. If you have any interest in property, there's no reason why you shouldn't be part of the Platinum brand. We have got it all systemized. It is right in there with rookies. You can spend 4, 5, 6 to 7 months in there till you get to a certain level, and then you can step up your way through the programs, and you can really start to educate yourself. And we're here to help. We've got the best systems in the country. Click the link below, and we will see you there.
Okay. Everything I say has to be caveated by we haven't a clue. Uncertainty reigns because...
No, I'm sorry, and I've got to cut in again. Is that his agenda?
That's
here?
his agenda.
Because he's fucking doing it, correct?
That is his agenda.
Yeah.
It's to sow chaos, uncertainty, volatility.
Yeah.
The unpredictability is extraordinary. And okay, we feel it over here, but talking to people on the ground in the States, they are as confused as we are.
Okay.
They get up every morning wondering what is the latest thing that Trump is jumping on. I've spent a lot of time in Canada, done a bit of work up there in recent years, and Canadians are lovely people. Well, sorry, I sound like Trump now saying they're lovely people. Sorry, but it's a great country. I love it, and Trump is now picking a serious row with Canada. The logic behind that is it totally escapes me. But Trump's point on the European Union is totally and utterly wrong. The European Union was not set up to screw the United States.
Yeah.
The European Union was a peace project after the Second World War. Treaty of Rome in 1958-59 and the formation of the European Union as we know it today was basically driven by this belief that after the Second World War, you could never again have a war like that on the continent of Europe. And they believed that economics was a way of achieving peace, because if you get countries trading with each other and people moving from country to country, single market, they become more integrated and friendly and less likely to go to war. And that has worked in Europe. And indeed, the United States actually, was a big driver of the European project back then. So it is utter rubbish and dangerous to suggest that the EU was set up for that purpose. But that's how Trump believes. Chaos, uncertainty, that's what he wants to create.
And he's created
He's created. He wants to push the boundaries of his power. He's going to see how far he can go. And, and if he goes too far, he'll back off again and he'll go off in a different direction. And that's what we're going to be faced with over the next few years. But there's a few fundamental things I think we need to understand about Trump insofar as we can. He's a total narcissist, but he has this view, America first. anything he does will be with a view to benefiting the United States. I actually think it's more Trump first than America first. But anyway, if you accept that America first mantra, and what flows from that is he hates free trade. He hates free trade agreements. You know, he was the one responsible for renegotiating during his last presidency the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And at the time, he said this was the best trade deal ever done. And in recent weeks, he's torn it up, said it was a dreadful trade deal. And he's kind of blaming Sleepy Joe and others for it. But he was instrumental. But so what we see is you cannot trust him at all, you know, and he says one thing and he turns around the following day and just tears it up. So, but anyway, trying to understand, he's anti-free trade, he's anti-free trade agreements, he's very isolationist, it's America first. So he's quite happy to totally antagonize Canada, to antagonize Greenland and Denmark, which owns Greenland effectively. He's antagonizing the European Union. And he's sowing absolute chaos. And how is this manifesting itself? Well, the key way it's manifesting itself is in the tariff regime. Okay, because he believes that the way to bring jobs back to the United States is by making imports from other countries much more expensive, because that's what a tariff is. You know, it's a tax on consumption, basically. So it's making things much more expensive. And he hopes that by doing that, they will start making those things in the United States. And there's a US retailer, Eddie Bauer, probably got the pronunciation wrong. I think they're in the shoes, clothing, sportswear type of area, that type of retailer, broadly speaking. But they said last December, they buy most of their stuff in from China. And if Trump puts tariffs on the stuff they import from China, they will just move the manufacturing to Indonesia or Vietnam or Mexico. And so the point is, they will not be moving the jobs back to the United States because it just does not make sense to manufacture that stuff in the United States at a low enough price, because, you know, the US is an expensive country to do business. So, but the tariff thing is how it's manifesting itself.
Because he like this tariff thing, he's coming out every day of the week. And they're not small tariffs. He's shouting 200%.
Oh, yeah.
50%. Like, these things can cripple countries. So our little shamrock of a country, beautiful little country, everyone loves it as we pick
we're great people.
We're great people. But I mean, he can destroy us very quickly.
Yeah, well,
or can he?
Well,
question.
I guess I would summarize this by saying Ireland's concentration risk.
Yeah.
Okay. And throw out a few statistics. At the end of last year, there was 302,560 people employed by multinational companies in this country.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of employment. That's 10.8% of Irish employment. And for every one job in a multinational, there's about 0.9 of a job supported in the rest of the economy. So in other words, you know, the multinationals buy in services mainly from SMEs.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, van delivery, electricians, whatever. Okay. Yeah. So lots of sub-supplies. So you're talking about nearly 600,000 jobs directly and indirectly dependent on the multinational sector. Most of the multinationals are, US. Yeah. Okay. And there's others as well, but it's mainly US. In 2023, the most recent data we have, 10 multinational companies paid 52% of corporation tax. Okay. The multinational sector in total accounted for about 85% of corporation tax. Multinational sector employs a lot of people, as I've said, but they also pay higher wages. And
absolutely,
the higher earners in our economy are, apart from professional services, financial service, and the health sector, the highest earners here are in the multinational sector. Yeah. And we have an incredibly progressive income tax system in the sense that the more tax you pay, the more you earn, the more tax you pay. So that means that a huge percentage of your income tax is dependent on those workers in the multinational sector. Last year, of our merchandise exports, and this is what Trump is focusing on, the chemical and pharmaceutical sector, which is dominated by multinationals, US multinationals particularly, They accounted for 66% of our total exports. Okay, so you can see the concentration risk. And the obvious risk would be then that if Trump does something that causes or forces or cajoles those companies to relocate back to the United States, we have a serious problem.
That's like when everything is doing very well and Micheál Martin's having a bit of crack out over in America, and that is the $1 million question.
It is, yeah.
If he does something crazy here, how long will that take to affect? And how dangerous can it be for this great little world that we see, maybe 167 billion sitting on deposit? How quick can everyone run?
Yeah, I think on the corporation tax side, we took in 39 billion last year. That was 36.2% of our total tax take. 10 years ago, we would have been lucky to take in 5 billion in corporation tax. It was a tiny percentage of the overall tax take. I know of the 39 billion, we have to caveat that by saying that 11 billion of that last year was due to the Apple tax ruling, and another 3 billion will come in this year. From that, it was 14 billion roughly in total. So, but even if you take that out, you're still looking at 25, 26 billion in corporation tax. And so it's an incredibly important part of the fiscal model here. And it has enabled us to deliver budget surpluses and spend money ad nauseum around the economy. There is massive uncertainty here at the moment about what exactly Trump could mean for Ireland. And I'm being real too. I hate
he likes the place. That's the only good thing about it.
But I hate being a two-handed economist. I like to be more definitive, but I can't be definitive about this because number one, we don't know what else he's going to do. But if he slaps significant tariffs on the imports of chemical and pharmaceutical products into the United States from Ireland, we have a problem.
Okay,
we have a huge problem. So that is one issue. And if he cuts the corporation tax rate from 21 to 15%, which is something he said he might do during the election campaign, that then removes Ireland's corporation tax advantage for those companies. I'm going to give you both sides of the argument here, okay? So if he does all of that stuff, US chemical farm companies may decide, well, actually, it makes more financial sense now to move back to the United States. Okay. But then on the other side of the equation, Ireland has a huge advantage in that we're the only native English-speaking country in the European Union at this stage, apart from Malta. That is important for US companies. Ireland is a great stepping stone into the European market for US companies. Ireland is a pretty good environment to do business, particularly for multinationals.
Fairly safe.
Okay, and it's safe, stable, and the election last year, we maintain political stability, whether you like it or not. But we maintain political stability, not much changes, and unlike a lot of other countries at the moment. So we offer a lot of attractions, and also multinational companies, the chemical pharma particularly, it's heavy investment, heavy capital investment in building these plants, and they tend to take about a 7-year investment time horizon. So the question is, will they react today to what may be a short-term disruption of their business model
from him?
So I think the IDA, well, at least what they're saying in public, is that they see the threat. They believe it's going to become much more difficult to attract new foreign direct investment into the country, but that the stuff that's here is here for a good reason and it's relatively stable. I genuinely don't know what the answer is, but I think on a risk spectrum, it is high risk for Ireland now, and we need to be very careful about how we manage it.
Yeah, and how we look into the future here. Because again, when he was asked the question the other day about the Irish housing, some lady reporter asked him the question about, Ireland has a major problem when it comes to housing. You're a real estate guy. How would you fix that? And he laughed. He went, well, you've got a problem because your country's doing very well. And I think he was saying, you guys are doing very well because my companies are there.
Yeah.
let's play the game here. But
Yeah.
and he didn't go into, most people would naturally think, well, if you take come up with a plan to say, well, we're going to start doing infrastructure here and and we'll loosen up the planning laws. He didn't. He said he got to the point very quickly. Your country's doing very well because of America. That's what I heard.
Oh, that's 100%. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Looking at, I guess, how Ireland deals with this threat from Trump, okay, diplomacy is important, but I think it's limited in terms of what it can achieve because, it was all hail fellow well met with Micheál Martin the other day, but yet he got in the digs. He knew exactly what he was saying. And there's every chance, of course, the following day he'll turn around and, hit Ireland a serious punch. So I would.
That's the level of confusion.
That is, but the diplomacy thing is still important.
Yeah.
And it was important for Micheál Martin not to piss him off the other day. Because there was no upside there. But he's been criticised for not bringing the Gaza situation up, for example.
Yeah.
I think that would have been nuts in those circumstances.
Yeah.
But the other things we need to do, we need to take a more strategic view on addressing the things that make Ireland a good place in which to do business.
Yeah.
Energy is a huge issue. Yeah. And we've seen serious difficulties in delivering data centers because of energy. We shouldn't be in that situation. We needed to push the renewable energy agenda much more aggressively than we have done. But we need to invest in energy. We need to invest in water. We need to invest in public services like health and education. We need to invest in infrastructure. And I think most importantly of all, we need to invest in housing because housing, we hear a lot about homelessness and the social implications of the housing shortage we have. Young people being forced to live at home with their parents, which is a horrible outcome for them. Yeah. But there is a serious economic aspect to housing as well. It is an element of national competitiveness. And, Trump was correct in saying that, in some ways, the housing crisis here is a reflection of economic success driven by US companies. But also, there is a more fundamental point. Between 2011 and 2023, for example, 2024 now, we delivered an average of just over 13,500 houses per annum. At the same time, our population was growing strongly, huge between inward migration and young people, moving through the population profile. We should have been building 40, 50,000 houses per annum during that period. So surprise, surprise, we now have a serious housing crisis. It's been building for years. We haven't addressed it properly. We need to build more houses. We need to address planning issues. We need to address the infrastructure to deliver housing, because even if you do build a house, put in a housing development at the moment, getting basic services like electricity and water
is a problem.
Is a huge problem, and the planning system is a huge problem. So there's a lot of stuff we have to do in the house. But the bottom line is the only way you solve the sort of housing crisis is to destroy demand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's destroying the economy. Yeah. So I hope to God that does not happen, because the last time we saw that was back in 2007, 2008. It's not pretty.
Good point. And again, there's people that hate Trump. Me personally, I think he's in there. He's a real estate guy, obviously, but I mean he is shifting through the gears. And usually when they shift through the gears at that speed, for a guy like you and Chris John to get confused and not being able to pinpoint what the next move is, that's his agenda, definitely.
It is,
and he's a massive negotiator when it comes to these things. Whether he done crack the other day with Zelensky, I think he personally shouldn't have done it, but that could be his negotiating way of doing business. Back to the next question. Do you feel, or is it just me or maybe a couple of people that are knocking around the platinum circuit, the last budget that we had, do you feel the government just took this money and, pardon my French, but just fucked it out of everything? Or am I completely wrong with that?
No, you're not actually. And I'm not agreeing with you for the sake of agreeing with you, but I've been saying this for the last 2 or 3 budgets. I found them utterly depressing. They were throwing money at everything, a scattergun approach, giving people like me electricity credits and yourself.
Yeah.
We don't really need electricity credits, do we? It's great to get money free from government, but we don't need it. These things are very expensive. So they threw money. I would much prefer to have seen a much narrower strategic approach. So, okay, definitely help people who are less well off in society, deal with the cost of living crisis and so on. From the perspective of social solidarity, that is really important. But I think even more important is the necessity to invest in these long-term strategic issues, which I've mentioned: energy, water, housing, infrastructure generally, public services like health and education. These are the areas we need to be spending money in. And we're not doing it. We're not doing it to the extent we need to. Yeah. So I think budgetary strategies be totally wrong. But here, going back to the beginning of our conversation about the world of economics, it's fine for economists to pontificate about this stuff, as I've done a lot in recent years. But the point is, we don't have to get re-elected. And politicians believe the only way we get re-elected is to throw money at everybody. That is an unfortunate reality. Yeah. So, and that is,
and that's what really, that's when you look in at the Trump side of things. I mean, he's taken severe action, whether people like it or not. He's literally gone, well, I don't care. This is my last time. Probably this is more than like. I think I asked you the question in 2022. At the time, we were like, that's not going to happen, and it did. But this is probably his last time, unless he's a miracle grower. But he's going to change something here big time. I wish there was a few Irish politicians that would not do the same aggressively, but get shit done that's needed to be done. Yeah. And stand up and take the punches and be willing to be given a bit of hammering on social media and to literally to get the job done.
Yeah. So absolutely.
We could use that money a lot better.
Isn't it quite amazing, Paul, that the world is shocked at a politician who turns around and delivers what he said he was going to deliver? None of this stuff should...
And the speed of it.
Yeah, the speed of it. None of this stuff should surprise us, but it is surprising us.
Well,
because we're not used to politicians actually delivering what they say they're going to deliver. I mean, I would like to see a political system here with a lot more balls, to be honest, to go ahead and do stuff. Leadership. And I don't know, maybe I'll probably piss off half your audience.
That's what we're here to do.
But for example, the water charges debacle back in the day. Yeah. I believe water charges should be paid. They're paid in virtually every country in the world because we need to invest in the water infrastructure. We need to use pricing to impact people's usage of water and so on. But the political system here just did not have the wherewithal to deliver that. So we need strong political leaders, and I actually don't see it.
You can't see any of them in the mist.
No, but sorry, let's not get carried away about this either. This is not a uniquely Irish problem.
It's worldwide.
You look across the world.
Yeah.
It is a characteristic of a lot of political systems.
This guy hopefully will shake them up.
I'd say there was Jean-Claude Juncker, who was the president of the European Commission at one stage. He once said that we all know what we have to do as politicians, but we do not know how we're going to get re-elected if we do it. So that's the reality.
Once you get in, you just tip away.
You do whatever you have to do to get re-elected.
Fifth or sixth.
Whereas in the US system, Trump does not have these constraints now. He's probably not going to go for re-election next time. He may try and change it to a third term, but and in fact,
he might be in prison next time.
there is a theory out there that Vance will become the next US president, and that Trump will run as his vice president, and then Vance gets sick and Trump takes over again.
That could be that AI.
That's a real conspiracy theory. Absolutely.
All right. Well, look. Let's as we know, my platform and my listeners are broad, but again, I absolutely love and adore property, like probably the Trump man does himself too. But we're going to try and tap in now into the world of property, and I think, for an investment point of view for ourselves, while everything is hunky-dory and you can get money very easy and we can try and, it's difficult to get property, but we can get the money to do the property very easy. We also have to look in at Trump, and that's why I brought him up today to say, can he take this he's creating this black, dark cloud that nobody can say, okay, well, it is okay, because we don't know what's going to happen after that point. We know we can get the money to do the deals. We know we can raise money fairly easy. We know that we've got the exit because the properties are needed. But what's your thoughts on...
We are delighted to announce that this podcast is sponsored by Platinum Ventures. Platinum Ventures, we buy houses fast.
Hi Dublin homeowners, are you struggling to sell your property fast in the open market? Or maybe that deal has collapsed? Okay, if you're facing this type of a problem, we have the perfect solution for you. Welcome to Platinum Ventures. We buy houses fast. Any property, any condition. We close out them deals within 28 days. Without the stress of having endless viewings and having to pump money into property only to sell it. We are not estate agents and therefore you will pay zero agent fees. Visit platinumventures.ie today. Platinum Ventures, we buy houses fast.
The property space at the moment and the investment world of in property, we see interest rates. Last time we were talking in 2022, we were confused. We were like, Jim, tell me quickly, is this thing going to stop? Are we going to head to, like, we went from a space of, in the buy-to-let space from 3.9%, 3.95, which we were able to get money at. It just went to 8.95, 7.95, super quick.
Yeah.
And
okay, there's a number of aspects, obviously, to the property space. And everything I say, again, this isn't my style.
Yeah.
Okay. But I have to caveat it in uncertainty because the Trump thing just fundamentally changed everything. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, looking at some of the factors that influenced property.
Yeah.
Okay. The interest rate side, the European Central Bank since June of last year has cut rates 6 times, 6.25% cuts, 1.5% in total. My belief is that the European Central Bank should cut rates by another 1% in the next 12 months because that's what the European economy needs, because the European economy is basically struggling along the bottom at the moment. So Europe needs lower interest rates. Inflation has come down to levels that the European Central Bank should be happy about. So I think, up to 1% should be delivered. I'm saying should.
Yeah. No,
okay,
that's fair.
That's what's warranted. So
we're still going to stress test anyway.
Yeah, that's obviously a positive for property. In terms of the dynamics of the property market here, there is a massive deficit of residential accommodation, both to buy and to rent. Okay, there's no doubt about that. We saw in 2024, planning permissions were down over 30%. Last year, and that's obviously a forward indicator of what's going to be delivered this year and next year. Last year, we delivered just over 30,000 residential completions. We need to be delivering up to 60,000 per annum. So there is, and that's on the supply side, and on the demand side, the demand is still incredibly strong. Yeah. We have a growing population. We have a very young population. A lot of young people who are living at home with the parents now, they want to buy property. So there's a lot of pent-up demand out there as well. So the demand...
And the money is in the European markets to go and get the money to build them. So
yes.
What, like, in your point, what is the price? Is it the planning permission? Is it the roadblocks back from government? What is the problem?
I think there's a lot of problems here.
Or sorry, the blockage.
The lot of blockages, yeah. There is a funding blockage for developers. Okay. Getting access to funding at a rate that would make it economically desirable to deliver, particularly apartments, just doesn't stack up at the moment. So the funding model is wrong, particularly for residential development. And I believe at this stage, and if somebody had said to me 10, 20 years ago, I'd have said something like this, I would have laughed, at least. But now I would say government should intervene and provide backstop to developer finance.
And
and subsidize it if necessary, because we have a national crisis. We need to address it. So that's one issue: funding model for development. The second issue is around planning.
Yeah,
the planning system.
Crazy.
it's crazy. And NIMBYism, feeds into that dramatically. We're not unique. The UK,
Yeah.
the same
I
discussion
heard
be
Chris
going on.
John's talking.
Absolutely. So the planning situation, the infrastructure, unless you have proper roads, public service like schools and health and so on, but so that's really important, getting water and electricity on site as quickly as possible. That is really
That's a
important.
problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not enough planners in the system.
Yeah, that's another problem.
It's another problem. So there's no silver bullet solution here.
So there's blockages.
There's a lot of different things. I think we need to look at vacant properties much more seriously. And I'm not talking about derelict properties. I'm talking about vacant properties that wouldn't require very much investment to make them habitable.
Yeah, I spoke to you earlier on about one that we've just secured 43 years empty in Dublin.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and that's not the only one.
Yeah, no.
Loads.
Well, I get the 15 bus into town through Rathmines, and it's remarkable on top of a bus to look down at all the vacant properties. But there's also, I think, the old cliched above the shop.
Yeah.
There's just so many retail premises around the country lying idle. They could be converted into 2 apartments.
Yeah, definitely.
For example. And there's a whole load of different things that need to happen.
We step over 40 minutes over into the UK, and it's a different setup. They're much more quicker. Jim, we have got the greatest minds in the country. We have got the greatest engineers out there. We're known for this. We can get shit done.
Yeah.
We've got some great entrepreneurs. We've got the money. Have we not got the leadership?
No.
Is there someone who won't in government say, okay, this is the model that's needed, and I'm putting my neck on the line, and I'm going to get this shit done. I'm going to set up a funding under this system. Is it like, let's not talk about that because of the Bertie times, and what's the problem?
I mean, let's face it. To me, one of the most positive things we've done in this country in the last 3 or 4 decades was the delivery of the roads infrastructure, for example.
Yeah.
And that was brave stuff. It was expensive. Okay, we did get EU funding for a lot of it, which was important, but it was expensive. There was huge planning issues, but we did it.
We did it, and it's a pleasure to travel them roads.
It's a pleasure, absolutely. Yeah. I get up and down to Waterford very often, and it's now an hour and 40 minutes.
I go to Cork listening to the Other Hand podcast all for I know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul.
But
all jokes aside,
that was the last time. And I mean, the development of the IFSC, the development of Temple Bar.
Yeah.
Say what you like about Temple Bar, but it's bloody successful. So stuff like that we've done in the past, but that required sort of strong political leadership. Love or hate Haughey, he actually was a visionary. They got stuff done. I just don't see that in the political system at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah,
and I think political leadership in any aspect of life is really important. But political leadership, I just don't see it.
Yeah, this drives O'Leary. I hear Michael O'Leary screaming from all the heights about different leadership aspects. And
I mean, there you are. We have the issue about the cap on Dublin Airport.
And they won't lift it.
I mean, that's mad stuff.
And you can see him getting very frustrated at it.
Yeah.
There's growth there to come in. I don't know the exact numbers of what that would look like.
Yeah,
but
you look at Ryanair, actually. You bring up Michael O'Leary. Ryanair being called out in the White House during the week, as the biggest buyers of Boeing aircraft for the last 15 years.
Irish.
We can do it. But we need leadership to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's screaming for too.
Absolutely.
I think when they go on the defence and they go slagging and taunting, it is to say, look, we have a country, we have greatly. Let's get some real brave minds in here to run this place.
Yeah, Paul, it struck me over the last month or two. New government in place. The world is imploding. It really is, and Trump represents the greatest existential threat to Ireland in many decades. There's no doubt about that, okay? But we're whistling past the graveyard. If you look at what has dominated the early weeks of the new government, the Dáil, it was speaking rights.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, for Christ's
yeah,
sakes.
speaking right, yeah.
Yeah.
You pronounce Ireland wrong, you're getting penalty.
Oh, it's
stupid.
Yeah, it's we're whistling past the graveyard, you know.
Jim, you're an absolute legend, and you come in with a massive amount of knowledge, and you know, for people like myself that might have pulled out of school early and believed them, we're not going to even get into the educational system in this country, because I think that's another debate. But again, for people that may have pulled away from school early, like we really respect the level of work you do to bring back some, you know, and simplify it. And I mean, the Other Hand podcast is really, and it's a bit of crack.
It is.
I love the bit of fighting that goes in there, but it's a good debate. It's a bit of crack, and it's taken all that knowledge that you guys spend hours upon hours listening to and dissecting, and not running it through AI, running it through factual stuff, and giving simple minds like ourselves and all of our
now,
listeners.
Paul, come on. Don't denigrate yourself.
Yeah, I might be heading to government next.
No, what you've achieved. Yeah.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and I always try and tap into your mind, because we know you're clever, so we're going to try and take a bit of crack out of this one as well. If Paul Green, and I know Trump done this, I remember listening to a podcast there of, I listened to one of his podcasts a good long time back, and he said, ring them back up and tell them I'll do the podcast for, I want £1 million check. And he got paid the £1 million.
Yeah.
So let's just assume I'm going to give you £1 million.
Thank you.
And you're going to be delighted, and you're going to be leaving Tala like saying, Paul Green, there you go, put me £1 million, he's doing well. Let's say we wire that check to you next Friday. You're going to have to give us a bit of time, right? And you pay your taxes because you're a good citizen of Ireland. What does Jim Power do with the rest of that money? If you didn't want it sitting in your bank, where would you park it for an
I
investment?
probably invested in Waterford FC or QPR, okay? I don't know. Seriously, it's a really good question. I stress I cannot give financial or investment advice, okay? Legally, I can't, because I'm not regulated by the central bank. You asked me a personal question, what would I do? I am 62, okay? So certain age profile, so I would tend to be more conservative than if I was 30 at this juncture, okay? Yeah. That's one point. You need to understand your tolerance for risk. Yeah. And, you know, I like risk, but the older you get, the less attractive risk becomes. Yeah. So that's one aspect. So I believe in diversification. Yeah. You know, I really do. I've always been an avid investor in equity markets, and I take a long-term perspective on it. Okay, I don't think one should be freaked by what happens over a 2 or 3 week period or whatever. You know, we had the financial crash, we had COVID. You know, with the Ukraine war, we now have the Trump correction in equity markets.
These are all little opportunities as well.
They are opportunities, absolutely. So I'm quite happy to take a longer term perspective on equity markets at this juncture. But I also believe in diversification. Yeah. You know, I like gold. Yeah. Because, and particularly during periods of uncertainty. And if there's one word that will be remembered from today's podcast, I hope it's uncertainty.
Definitely.
Okay. So gold, but property is more challenging at the moment because, you know, we see the existential threat that I've spoken about of Trump to the FDI model here. Yeah. You know, that could impact. COVID had a fundamental impact on commercial property as well. Here, everywhere, San Francisco, you know, city centre was decimated after COVID because of people working from home. But now people are returning to the office, which I see is a good thing. So I would have some property in there at the moment, but be a little bit more cautious at this juncture than in the past. But if I was being forced into, sorry, I shouldn't say forced in, but I'd be more interested in residential investment at the moment than commercial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's been absolutely brilliant, Jim. I really appreciate your support of the Platinum brand. You came in here when we were only starting up. You've been a loyal supporter to us. You will be the only economist that is associated to my brand. I will never diversify from anyone, just so I can get that in to let you know. I really, really support and trust the stuff you're doing. And the people that listen into this, whether they say Jim Power and Paul Green were ranting on about something crazy over there, that's the facts of life. And as making an investment, when you're looking at all these broad things, the economy kicks in to a lot of decision that when I'm making a financial decision to buy a house or to buy another rental property or whatever it is, or buy gold or whatever, we have to look at the economy. And we have to look at this dark cloud that's up there. And sometimes when, a simple mind is looking up at it, it's too confusion. It's too messy. And I mean, I really appreciate the way you said today, this thing is, we don't know what's happening. Like, we can't tell what this guy is going to do, because whatever he does is going to affect the world.
Yeah.
But I like the way your honesty about the approach to it as well, to say, look at the whole aspect of it, look at the whole landscape, take everything in and try and pinpoint the right decision that you can for your investment. And the way we talked about today, leadership is a big thing. And if we can get a few minds in government with the right leadership, I think we can fix this blockage that we have in the property, because that's all really it is. It is a blockage.
Yeah.
And somebody needs to take control and say, this is what we're doing, and it's happening at this time, and that's the end of it.
You'd have to question also actually the role of permanent government here. The civil service departments, the Department of Housing, for example, the Department of Energy. Are they actually doing enough to push this stuff?
Well, I think you're dead correct with that. And it is, because I just looked at my notes there and I seen Musk. And I'm not even getting into that. Whether this mad thing has brought him in here to really destroy departments like that and say, this is the way it's going to happen. That's definitely in there.
That is not the correct approach, actually, because he's indiscriminate about it. Because I met a girl in San Francisco who has a PhD in science, and she was working in Alzheimer's research. Yeah. And the funding was just ceased.
No, you're spot on. I'm chatting to a guy about a different business, stepping in, because we think we can take the business to a different level. And the very first thing he said to me is, you're not stepping in here to destroy anything. You sit back and shut up for 6 months. And I was thinking, well, Elon Musk just went in and destroyed it. But you're correct.
You have to take a more strategic approach.
Definitely, you are correct.
But still, fundamentally, what they're trying to achieve, maybe desirable enough. Yeah.
Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on board. We didn't get on to the S&P 500. It's on a little bit of a shake at the moment as well, but
it's technically now in correction territory, in that it has fallen by over 10% from its peak in February. You'd have to think, with all of the uncertainty out there at the moment, we ain't seen the end of it yet. But for investors in equity markets, I would say you obviously have to gauge your own risk and tolerance for losses and so on. But long-term perspective is really important.
Yeah. Any last final thoughts?
No, I mean, I hope I haven't sown total confusion here today. But that reflects my mindset at the moment, and the mindset of everybody I talk to that I trust and believe. Yeah. We're confused. Yeah. And when you get a major disruptor like Trump, backed up by somebody like Musk, you think, just be cautious, be careful.
Where can people listen in? Where's the best place if people want to tap into your mindset as well and listen into what you're doing?
Well, I suppose the most visible manifestation of myself now is the podcast, The Other Hand, on Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. We have a Substack account, Chris and myself, where we write a lot of stuff about everything. Yeah. Whatever comes into our mind, we write about it. So, but check out the podcast. And, some people hate it, some people like it. We piss off people, but that's the nature of debate.
Isn't that social media?
Funny, on social media, actually, I have left Twitter. Yeah, I have left Facebook a long time ago because I just found it all way too toxic, and I just don't believe anything anymore. I use LinkedIn, actually. Maybe it's my age and my conservatism again.
There's a little bit more manners in there.
I kind of like LinkedIn. I learn a lot from it. Yeah. Okay, so social media, I I've become, I'm on Blue Sky. And
Never even heard of that.
yeah, exactly. Not too many people are using it yet, but yeah, social media has become much less important because I just found it too toxic.
Yeah.
And I wasn't learning much.
Yeah.
And I was also getting information that I seriously doubted.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Jim, absolute pleasure having you on board today.
My pleasure,
Thanks
Paul.
a million for doing this for me and for the guys and girls that listen in. It helps an awful lot with their careers. And we may see you by the end of the year at some point again for
I look forward to it, Paul.
another
Absolutely.
debate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And a brief thank you to today's sponsors of our podcast, Platinum Property Training and Platinum Ventures. Thank you very much for listening in.